Hello, I'm going to show you how to assemble a singer's mask using the burrito method. So I've assembled my bottom piece and my top piece, but I've left my front piece separate because we're going to do that as we assemble. For simplicity, I've made the inside layer red. So there's my inside layers. And my outside layer is one of my own designs. It's available on Spoonflower, and it's a really large scale of my scorpion tattoo design. Joan asked me to show an alternative zip tie casing, so here it is. Instead of sewing through my filter fabric on this one, I've done two 1-inch strips of cotton, and I've sewn them at a 1/2 inch from the edge on either side, and then in from there at another 3/8 of an inch so that I can slide my zip tie casings through there, but I haven't sewn through the filter fabric. I did do a 1/8 inch stitch along here just to attach those two pieces together to make it easier to assemble, just along the top, and I'm going to trim the bottom so I won't bother doing it there. Alright, so to go through our burrito assembly method, I'm going to make sure that I've marked the center point of each of my pieces really carefully because I'm going to be working with those center points. So center point on all the pieces, and I'm always going to start from there and work my way out. Starting with the inside front piece, I'm going to find the center point for the top, and then I'm going to match the inside of my top piece or my nose piece at the center point as well. I'm just going to lie it flat and make sure that it's also lining up these two ends symmetrically. Then I'm going to take my front piece and line up the center points on top. From here, I'm going to clip all 3 layers, starting from the center and working my way out. My front fabric, the fabric that's going to be facing out, is a Petal Signature cotton. It's got a little bit of give, but the filter fabric that I use, the Spun Bond polypropylene, has no give. So I'm going to tension that front fabric, the cotton, just a little bit to stretch it out, so that it doesn't pucker when I sew this seam all the way to the end. Doesn't matter if these two edges line up. All I'm trying to do is get these three pieces lined up. We're not going to sew the sides together at this point. We're just sewing the seam along the top edge of your front piece. And it is a curve, so use as many clips as you need to. I'm using clips instead of pins so that I'm not pinning through my filter. There was a question that came up on the Masks for Performers Facebook group. How do you cut your pattern pieces without using pins? And I just glue my pattern pieces to some cardstock and I trace them with a pen and then I cut them out. So from here, I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam along the top. I go back and forth because I'm going to turn it and I don't want that seam to open. And I'm just using my bottom hand here to make sure my layers aren't getting caught underneath. When you get to your center point, you can check that everything's still lining up there. And then as I get to the end, I'm just going to make sure I'm still following the curve and catching all my layers. back and forth at the end to make sure that seam doesn't open up. And you can see how that's going to look. There's the outside of my mask and the inside of my mask. But I'm going to open that up again at the front. So I've got my inside here and the outside at the bottom. My inside is my red, and I'm going to find the center point there and take the bottom piece of my mask and match the two insides together. So in this case, I'm matching my two red pieces together at my center seam. And I'm just sewing together the cotton and the interfacing layer there. I'm not sewing the front piece yet. So insides together here. I like to go to the end to about 1/2 inch and clip, making sure all those layers are lying flat, 1/2 inch on the other side. You can ease this curve as well, whatever you like. And then I go to about the middle and I do a little dart or a little pleat. I've gotten a bit casual about this part because I've done so many of them, but if you want to go around and make sure, oops, lost a clip there. If you want to go through and make sure that you've got it perfectly symmetrical or mark it or whatever you'd like to do there, that's fine. So from here, I'm going to sew 1/8 inch along just to join these two pieces of fabric together. Making sure that the center points are lined up. If you're using a fabric that's got more give, you might need to fuss with this a little bit more. Did back and forth on the end there. And we're ready to make our little burrito roll. So from here, I'm going to take the front and I'm going to line it up to this center point, front sides together, so my scorpion fabric together. To do that, I'm going to smush these inside layers up. It doesn't really matter how you smush them. You can kind of tuck them in or fold them. You just want to make sure they're not going to get caught up in your seam. Find my center point and bring it up to the top there. So I've got the right sides of my outside layer of the mask together here. And I'm going to clip it from the center, adding a little bit of tension along that petal signature cotton, just because it does have some give. The petal cotton is great because it's got quite a bit of structure, and I find it's a really good pair for the filter fabric, but it still does have a little more give than the filter, so I'm tensioning it just a touch along there, right to the end. And then the same thing on the other side, working from the center. Just making sure that my nose piece, you know, the top of my nose piece or my flannel or the chin piece aren't getting caught in those layers. Just getting those raw edges together. To the end. Don't worry if your ends don't line up perfectly, we can fix that later. Here's my burrito. I'm going to do a generous 1/4 inch along that seam. Going back and forth at the beginning and the end because we're going to fold it. Here we go. Little gathers are okay, it won't affect the filtration, but you do want to make sure that the chin piece doesn't get tangled up. And then I go back and forth at the end to reinforce that seam before I turn it. Oops. There we go. And now I'm going to turn it from one end, just working my way slowly, making sure not to use any sharp tools or pointy tools to do this part because you don't want to puncture through your fabric layers. And just, you know, take your time with the tiny masks. This takes a little bit of extra patience and time, but with these adult size masks, it's really not too bad. It's like turning a sock inside out, really. You just pull it through. Et voila. There is your mask. So the inside there, you can see there's no exposed seams. You want to check and make sure that your channels are still visible, that they haven't been sucked into that seam as you were working. You'll still be able to fit your zip tie through. And then to finish off the edges of the mask, feel free to look at my other videos on IG Live or IGTV, and I'll show you in those videos how to do the elastics and everything. But that is your burrito method for the Joan Fernley version 3 singer's mask. The pattern is available for free from the Masks for Performers Facebook page. Feel free to message me with any questions.